Homeless people evicted for luxury event. Invited celebrities' attitude goes viral and divides opinions. Hello, welcome. Leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. The quiet of dawn is shattered by the sound of footsteps and raised voices. It's not a typical morning on the streets. Something is terribly wrong. As the first rays of sunlight hit the pavement, dozens of homeless people are being forced to pack up their entire lives. Security guards, dressed in sharp uniforms, push them out of the way, their eyes cold, indifferent. A woman, grey hair matted, holding onto a tattered blanket like it's the last thing she owns, looks up at the grand hotel looming abbey. Meanwhile, inside the opulent walls of the hotel, a glamorous celebrity adjusts her gown, preparing for what is supposed to be the event of the year. Outside, lives are being torn apart, but she has no idea. Not yet. The world she's about to step into is about to collide with a reality she's never known, and when it does, everything changes. What happens next will not only shake her to the core, but will ignite a storm that no one could have predicted. You can feel it in the air. Something is about to break. The question is, when it does, who will survive the fallout? The first rays of dawn broke over the skyscrapers of Los Angeles, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. But on the streets below, a very different scene was unfolding. The usual morning bustle was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the shuffling of feet and muffled sobs. Maggie Thompson, a 68-year-old woman with silver hair and weathered hands, clutched a tattered photo album to her chest as she was roughly pushed forward by a burly security guard. Her eyes, filled with fear and confusion, darted around frantically, searching for familiar faces among the sea of displaced individuals. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is all I have left." The guard's face remained impassive as he continued to herd her along with the others. Behind them loomed the gleaming facade of the Starlight Hotel, its five-star luxury a stark contrast to the human tragedy playing out on its doorstep. As Maggie stumbled on the uneven sidewalk, a young man with dreadlocks caught her arm. "Easy there, Miss Maggie," he said softly. "We gotta keep moving." "But where are we going, Jamal?" Maggie asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Where's everyone else?" Jamal shook his head, his own eyes reflecting the helplessness they all felt. "I don't know, Miss Maggie. They're scattering us all over, breaking us up." A few yards away, a mother clutched her crying toddler, trying to soothe him while balancing a garbage bag full of their meager possessions. An elderly man in a wheelchair was being pushed by a teenager, both looking lost and afraid. The quiet desperation of the scene was suddenly shattered by the roar of an engine. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows rolling down to reveal the face of Emma Reed, Hollywood's latest it girl. Her perfectly made-up face betrayed no emotion as she surveyed the chaos around her. "Ms. Reed, we're running a bit late," her assistant said nervously from the front seat. "The red carpet for the charity gala starts in an hour." Emma nodded absently, her eyes locked on Maggie, who was now being forcibly separated from Jamal. For a brief moment, their gazes met, the world-famous actress and the homeless woman, a chasm of experience and circumstance between them. "What's going on here?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her assistant cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Oh, just a bit of cleaning up for the event. You know how these things go. Can't have any unsightly elements ruining the ambiance." Emma's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm, but she remained silent. The SUV pulled away, leaving behind the sounds of protests and quiet sobs. Inside the Starlight Hotel, a flurry of activity contrasted sharply with the somber scene outside. Staff members rushed about, hanging elaborate floral arrangements and polishing every surface until it gleamed. In the grand ballroom, a stage was being set up for the night's performances, a banner proclaiming "Hope for the Homeless Gala" hanging above it. Emma was whisked away to a luxurious suite where a team of stylists descended upon her. As they fussed over her hair and makeup, she found herself drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street below. "Darling, you simply must wear the Cartier diamonds," her stylist gushed, holding up a glittering necklace. They'll look fabulous with your Versace gown." But Emma wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the street, where the last of the homeless were being herded away. She watched as Maggie, looking small and fragile, was pushed into a van with blacked-out windows. "Ms. Reed?" Her assistant's voice broke through her reverie. "We need to go over your speech for tonight. The organizers want to emphasize the importance of community support and—" Emma cut him off with a wave of her hand. "I need some air," she said abruptly, stepping out onto the balcony. The cool morning breeze hit her face, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled luxury inside. From her vantage point, she could see the full extent of the cleaning-up operation. Tents were being torn down, shopping carts full of possessions confiscated, and people, real people with lives and stories, were being treated like trash to be swept away. A lump formed in Emma's throat as she watched a young girl, no more than 7 or 8, clutching a ratty stuffed animal as she was led away by a social worker. The child's eyes were wide with fear and confusion, mirroring the expression Emma had seen on Maggie's face earlier. "Ms. Reed?" Her assistant's voice called from inside the suite. "We really need to finalize your talking points for tonight." Emma took a deep breath, her hand gripping the balcony railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. She turned back to the room, the sounds of preparation for the gala, a jarring counterpoint to the quiet desperation she'd just witnessed. As she stepped back inside, Emma caught a glimpse of herself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at her was a vision of Hollywood glamour. Perfectly coiffed hair, flawless makeup, and a designer gown that cost more than most people made in a year. But behind her eyes, a storm was brewing. "Let's get this over with," she said, her voice tight with an emotion she couldn't quite name. As her team swarmed around her, making last-minute adjustments and running through the evening's schedule, Emma's mind kept drifting back to the street, to Maggie's eyes, full of fear and loss, to the young girl with her stuffed animal, to the stark reality that lay just beyond the hotel's gilded doors. The irony of preparing for a Hope for the Homeless gala while actual homeless people were being forcibly removed from the area was not lost on her. But what could she do? She was just an actress, here to smile for the cameras and help raise money for a cause she'd never truly understood until this moment. As she was ushered towards the elevator, Emma caught one last glimpse of the street through a window. It was empty now, sanitized for the evening's festivities, but the image of Maggie's face remained burned into her mind, a silent accusation that would haunt her throughout the night to come. The elevator doors closed, sealing Emma in a bubble of luxury and privilege, but as she descended towards the red carpet and the flashing cameras, a seed of doubt had been planted, a question that would change everything. What was the true cost of this night's glamour and generosity? Little did she know, her world was about to be turned upside down, and the choices she would make in the coming hours would have consequences far beyond anything she could imagine. The Starlight Hotel's grand ballroom was a dazzling spectacle of wealth and extravagance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the sound of polite laughter. But for Emma Reed, the atmosphere felt suffocating. She stood near the bar, a flute of champagne untouched in her hand, her eyes constantly darting to the ornate double doors. Part of her wanted to flee, to escape the oppressive glamour and find... what? She wasn't sure. "Emma, darling!" A shrill voice cut through her thoughts. Vivian Sinclair, Hollywood's most notorious gossip columnist, air-kissed her cheeks. "You look absolutely divine. That Versace is to die for." Emma forced a smile. "Thank you, Vivian. You're too kind. Now, tell me," Vivian leaned in conspiratorially. "I heard a little rumor about you and that hunky co-star of yours. Any truth to it?" Before Emma could respond, a booming voice echoed through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host for the evening, the incomparable Emma Reed." Applause erupted as Emma made her way to the stage, her steps measured and careful in her towering heels. As she faced the crowd, the dozens of expectant faces blurred together. All she could see was Maggie's weathered visage, filled with fear and confusion. "Good evening," Emma began, her voice slightly shaky. "Thank you all for coming to the Hope for the Homeless Gala. Your generosity tonight will make a real difference in the lives of those less fortunate." The words felt hollow in her mouth. How could she stand here, draped in diamonds, talking about helping the homeless when just hours ago she had witnessed their forcible removal? As Emma continued her scripted speech, her mind wandered back to the street. What had happened to Maggie, to the young girl with the stuffed animal, to all those people whose lives had been upended for the sake of this glittering event? And with your support, we can create a brighter future for those struggling on our streets, Emma concluded, barely aware of what she was saying. The crowd erupted in applause once more, but Emma hardly noticed. As she stepped off the stage, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "I must say, the city really outdid themselves this time," a portly man in an ill-fitting tuxedo was saying. "The streets are so much cleaner for the event. It's about time they did something about that eyesore." His companion, a woman dripping in jewels, nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, I know. It's so much nicer without all those vagrants cluttering up the sidewalks. Makes you feel safer, doesn't it?" Emma felt bile rise in her throat. She needed air, now. Slipping away from the crowd, she found a side door that led to a small balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air hit her face, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the ballroom. Los Angeles sprawled before her, a glittering tapestry of lights. Somewhere out there, Maggie and the others were struggling to find shelter for the night, and here she was, playing dress-up and pretending to care. "Ms. Reed?" A tentative voice came from behind her. It was Jake, her assistant, looking concerned. "Is everything all right? You seem distracted." Emma turned to face him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Jake, what happened to those people? The ones who were removed this morning?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure, Ms. Reed. I believe the city has protocols for situations like this, shelters and such." "Shelters," Emma repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. "And what if there isn't enough room? What if they're separated from their friends, their community?" Jake remained silent, clearly out of his depth. Emma made a sudden decision. "I need to go back there, to where we saw them this morning." "But Ms. Reed, the gala, your speech," Jake protested weakly. "Can wait," Emma finished firmly. "This is more important." Ignoring Jake's continued objections, Emma strode back into the ballroom. She grabbed her clutch and made her way to the exit, dodging well-wishers and photographers alike. As she reached the hotel's grand entrance, she heard a familiar voice. "Emma? Where are you going? The auction is about to start." It was Bradley Cooper, her co-star and rumored love interest. His handsome face was creased with confusion. "I'm sorry, Brad," Emma said, not slowing her pace. "There's something I need to do." Before he could respond, she was out the door and on the street. The valet, recognizing her, quickly brought around her car. As Emma slid behind the wheel of her Tesla, she caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at her was a far cry from the polished starlet who had arrived at the hotel hours earlier. Her carefully styled hair was coming undone, and there was a wild look in her eyes. But for the first time that evening, Emma felt like she could breathe. She pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the glittering facade of the Starlight Hotel. Her diamond necklace caught the light of passing street lamps as she drove, a reminder of the world she was leaving behind, if only for a night. Emma had no idea what she would find when she reached her destination. She didn't know what she could do to help, or if her presence would even be welcome. But she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she couldn't go back to that ballroom and pretend everything was fine. As she navigated the familiar streets of Los Angeles, now seeing them through new eyes, Emma realized she was at a crossroads. The choices she made tonight could change everything: her career, her public image, her entire life. But the image of Maggie's face, of the young girl clutching her stuffed animal, spurred her on. Whatever the consequences, Emma knew she had to try to make things right. Little did she know, her impulsive decision to leave the gala was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shock the nation and force everyone, from Hollywood elites to ordinary citizens, to confront some uncomfortable truths about the society they lived in. As Emma turned onto the street where she had witnessed the morning's evictions, her heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. Emma's Tesla glided to a stop at the corner where she had last seen Maggie. The street, once teeming with makeshift shelters and desperate faces, was now eerily empty. The sidewalks had been power washed, leaving no trace of the community that had called this place home just hours before. As Emma stepped out of her car, the cool night air made her shiver in her designer gown. She felt absurdly out of place, like an alien who had crash-landed in a foreign world. The click of her heels on the pavement echoed loudly in the silence. "Hello?" she called out tentatively. "Is anyone here?" For a moment, there was no response. Then, from the shadows of a nearby alley, a figure emerged. Emma's heart leapt as she recognized the silver hair and weathered face. "Maggie?" she said, taking a step forward. The elder woman squinted at her in the dim streetlight. "Do I know you, miss?" Emma felt a pang of guilt. Of course Maggie wouldn't recognize her. Their earlier encounter had been so brief, and Emma had been safely ensconced in her luxury vehicle. "No, I saw you this morning, during the—" Emma trailed off, unsure how to describe the traumatic event. "The eviction," Maggie finished flatly. Her eyes hardened as she took in Emma's appearance. "You're one of them, aren't you? From that fancy hotel?" Emma nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "I am. I was. I left the gala. I needed to know what happened to everyone." Maggie's laugh was bitter. "What happened? We got scattered to the wind. That's what happened. Some went to shelters if they were lucky enough to find space. Others, well, you're looking at the unlucky ones." As if on cue, more figures began to emerge from the alley. Emma recognized some of them from that morning. The young man with dreadlocks, the mother with her toddler, the elderly man in the wheelchair. "Why are you here?" The young man, Jamal, Emma remembered, asked warily. "Come to gawk at the poor folks?" Emma shook her head vehemently. "No, I want to help. I need to understand what's really going on." The group exchanged skeptical glances. The mother spoke up, her voice tired but defiant. "You want to understand? Try sleeping on concrete with a hungry child. Try watching everything you own get tossed in a dumpster because some rich folks want a prettier view." Emma felt her eyes fill with tears. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," Maggie cut in, her tone softening slightly. "Why would you? People like us, we're invisible to people like you. Until we're not, and then we're a problem to be solved." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but the words died on her lips. Wasn't that exactly how she had viewed the situation this morning? As an inconvenience, a blemish on an otherwise perfect day. "Please," she said instead, "tell me your stories. Help me understand." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Maggie sighed heavily. "Well, you're here now. Might as well make yourself useful. There's a 24-hour diner around the corner. Buy us some coffee and maybe we'll talk." As the group made their way to the diner, Emma felt like she was walking into another world. The bright fluorescent lights inside were a stark contrast to the dim street, and the regular patrons stared openly at the mismatched group. A Hollywood starlet in a couture gown, surrounded by clearly homeless individuals. They settled into a large booth, and Emma ordered coffee and food for everyone. As they waited, Maggie began to speak. "I've been on these streets for 3 years now," she said quietly. "Used to be a teacher, if you can believe it. Then my husband died, medical bills piled up, and, well, here I am." One by one, the others shared their stories. Jamal had aged out of the foster system with nowhere to go. The young mother, Sarah, had fled an abusive relationship with nothing but her son and the clothes on their backs. The elderly man, Mr. Chen, had lost his home to a predatory loan. As Emma listened, her heart breaking with each tale, she began to see the full picture of a system that had failed these people at every turn. The charities, the shelters, the social programs, they were band-aids on a gaping wound. "But what about the gala?" she asked, confused. "Aren't they raising money to help people like you?" The group's bitter laughter was answer enough. That money? Jamal scoffed. It goes to fancy new shelters that look good in photos, but don't actually help anyone. Or to job training programs that train us for jobs that don't exist. Meanwhile, Sarah added, bouncing her sleepy toddler on her knee, the real estate developers behind these charitable events are the same ones pushing for stricter anti-homelessness laws. They don't want to solve the problem. They want to hide it. Emma felt sick to her stomach. She thought of the smiling faces at the gala, the self-congratulatory speeches, the obscene amounts of money being thrown around. And all the while, the very people they claimed to be helping were suffering just outside their doors. As the night wore on and more coffee was consumed, Emma found herself drawn deeper into their world. She learned about the informal support networks they had built, the small kindnesses that kept them going, and the constant fear and uncertainty that plagued their lives. By the time the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, Emma knew she could never go back to her old life. The blinders had been ripped away, and she saw the world with new eyes. "I want to help," she said firmly, looking around the table at the faces that had become familiar over the long night. "Really help, not just throw money at the problem. What can I do?" The group exchanged glances, a mix of hope and skepticism in their eyes. "You really want to make a difference?" Maggie asked, leaning forward. "Then you need to expose the truth. Show the world what's really happening, not just the sanitized version they see at galas and on TV." Emma nodded slowly, her mind racing. She had a platform, a voice that people listened to, but using it like this, it would mean risking everything she had worked for. As if reading her thoughts, Jamal spoke up. "It won't be easy. The people behind all this, they've got power. They won't like having their pretty illusions shattered." "I know," Emma said, a steely determination settling over her. "But it's the right thing to do." As they left the diner, the city coming to life around them, Emma felt both terrified and exhilarated. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same. Little did she know, the decision she had just made would set off a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Hollywood, challenge the nation's perceptions of homelessness, and force Emma to confront the true cost of speaking truth to power. As she bid farewell to her new friends, promising to return soon, Emma realized that this was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would test her resolve, her compassion, and her courage in ways she could never have imagined. Emma's Tesla hummed quietly as she pulled into the underground parking of her Bel Air mansion. The contrast between the opulent surroundings and the stark reality she had just witnessed was jarring. As she stepped out of the car, still wearing her rumpled Versace gown, her phone began to buzz incessantly. Inside, Emma found her living room occupied by her frantic publicist, Janet, and her agent, Mike. Their faces were a mix of concern and barely concealed anger. "Where the hell have you been?" Janet exclaimed, waving her phone. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mike, always the calmer of the two, interjected, "Emma, sweetheart, we've got a situation here. You disappearing from the gala. It's all over social media. People are speculating. We need to get ahead of this." Emma sank into her plush sofa, suddenly feeling the weight of the night's events. "I'm sorry, I couldn't stay there. Not after what I saw." Janet and Mike exchanged worried glances. "What you saw?" Janet asked cautiously. Taking a deep breath, Emma recounted everything: the morning evictions, her night with Maggie and the others, the truths she had uncovered about the charity's true nature. As she spoke, Janet's face grew increasingly pale, while Mike's brow furrowed deeper. "Emma," Mike said slowly, "I understand you're upset, but we need to think about this rationally. You're at the peak of your career. The offers rolling in. We're talking Oscar bait roles, multi-million-dollar endorsements. We can't jeopardize all that over this." "This?" Emma repeated, her voice rising. "You mean actual human beings being treated like trash? Our whole industry turning a blind eye to suffering while patting itself on the back?" Janet stepped in, her tone placating. "Of course it's terrible, Emma, but you're an actress, not an activist. There are proper channels for this kind of thing. We can make a sizable donation to a reputable homeless charity. Issue a statement about your commitment to the cause. That'll satisfy everyone and—" "No," Emma cut her off, standing up. "You don't understand. I can't just go back to pretending everything's fine. I promised Maggie and the others I'd tell their story." Mike's face hardened. "Emma, listen to me. If you go public with this, you're not just risking your career. You'll be taking on some very powerful people. The studio heads, the real estate moguls. They won't take kindly to being exposed like this." "He's right," Janet added. "They'll crush you, Emma. Everything you've worked for gone in an instant. And for what? Do you really think you can change anything?" Emma walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sprawling city below. Somewhere out there, Maggie was probably huddled in an alley, trying to find a safe place to sleep. "Maybe I can't change everything," she said softly. "But I have to try. I can't unsee what I've seen." She turned back to face her team, her jaw set with determination. "I'm going to tell their story. I'm going to use my platform to expose the truth." Janet threw up her hands in exasperation. "This is career suicide, Emma. You'll be blacklisted. No one will touch you with a 10-foot pole." "Then so be it," Emma replied, her voice steady. "Some things are more important than my career." Mike, seeing the resolve in Emma's eyes, sighed heavily. "If you're determined to do this, at least let us help you do it right. We need a strategy, a way to protect you as much as possible." Emma nodded, grateful for the small show of support. "Okay, what do you suggest?" For the next few hours, the three of them huddled around Emma's dining table, formulating a plan. They decided on a multi-pronged approach: a heartfelt social media post, a tell-all interview with a respected journalist, and a pledge to use her resources to directly help the homeless community she had met. As Janet and Mike finally left, the sun was rising over Los Angeles. Emma stood on her balcony, watching the city come to life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. "Hope you're okay. Whatever you decide, thank you for listening." Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was her last chance to back out, to return to her safe, comfortable life. But as she thought of Maggie's weathered face, of Sarah's tired eyes, of Jamal's bitter laugh, she knew there was no going back. She typed out her reply, "I'm doing it. I'm telling your story. All of it." As she hit send, Emma felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same. Little did she know, her decision was about to set off a chain reaction that would shake Hollywood to its core, divide public opinion, and force her to confront the true cost of speaking truth to power. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Emma Reed, Hollywood's darling, prepared to risk it all for a cause she never expected to champion. The world was about to see a side of her it never knew existed, and the consequences would be far-reaching and profound. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind for Emma. Her team worked tirelessly to prepare for what they knew would be a media firestorm. Emma herself spent hours on the phone with Maggie, getting more details and ensuring she had permission to share their stories. Finally, it was time. Emma sat in the green room of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, her heart pounding. This wasn't her usual light-hearted chat show appearance. Tonight, she was about to change everything. "Please welcome Emma Reed." Trevor's voice boomed through the speakers. Emma walked out, smiling nervously at the applauding audience. As she sat down, Trevor leaned in, his expression serious. "So, Emma, I understand you have something important you want to share with us tonight." Taking a deep breath, Emma nodded. "Yes, Trevor. What I'm about to say, it's going to shock a lot of people, but it needs to be said." For the next 10 minutes, Emma poured her heart out. She described the morning evictions, her night with Maggie and the others, and the disturbing truth she had uncovered about the charity gala and the real estate developers behind it. As she spoke, the studio audience fell silent. Even Trevor, known for his quick wit, seemed at a loss for words. "I can't stay silent anymore," Emma concluded, her voice thick with emotion. "These are real people, with real lives, being treated like they're disposable. And it's happening right under our noses, in the name of charity and urban renewal. It has to stop. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It grew louder and louder until the entire studio was on its feet. As Emma left the stage, her phone exploded with notifications. Her social media posts detailing her experience and calling for action were going viral. Emma Reed Speaks Out and Watch Homelessness Uncovered were trending worldwide. But as the initial wave of support rolled in, so did the backlash. The next morning, Emma woke to find her face plastered across every news channel and tabloid. The headlines ranged from Emma Reed, Hollywood's Conscience, to Star's Meltdown, Career Over. Her phone rang. It was Janet, her publicist. "Emma, turn on E-News, now." Emma fumbled for her remote, her stomach dropping as she saw the headline, "Emma Reed Exposed, the Truth Behind Her Homeless Crusade." The anchor, a perfectly coiffed blonde, spoke with a mix of concern and disdain. Sources close to the actress claim that Reed's recent behavior is the result of substance abuse issues. Her erratic actions at the charity gala and subsequent accusations against respected philanthropists are, according to insiders, signs of a star in crisis. Emma felt the room spin. She had expected pushback, but this was character assassination. As the day wore on, the attacks intensified. Representatives from the charity gala issued statements expressing disappointment in Ms. Reed's mischaracterization of events. Real estate developers hinted at potential lawsuits for defamation. Worst of all, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her agent, Mike. "Studio's pulling out of your next project. They can't risk the association. I'm so sorry, Emma." Emma sank onto her couch, her head in her hands. She had known there would be consequences, but the reality was overwhelming. Her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for was crumbling around her. Just as despair threatened to overtake her, her phone lit up with another message. It was from Maggie. "Saw you on TV. You did good, kid. We're all behind you." Attached was a photo of Maggie and the others, gathered around a small TV in the shelter, all giving thumbs up. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes, but this time, they were tears of determination. She might be facing the fight of her life, but she wasn't alone. Standing up, Emma walked to her home office. She had work to do. If they wanted a war, she'd give them one. She began drafting a statement, reaching out to investigative journalists and compiling evidence. As night fell over Los Angeles, Emma Reed stood at her window, looking out at the city she thought she knew. The glitz and glamour of Hollywood seemed hollow now, a shiny faux jade hiding ugly truths. But amidst the turmoil, a new sense of purpose burned within her. She had found her voice, and she wasn't about to be silenced. Little did Emma know, her battle was just beginning. The forces aligned against her were powerful and ruthless. But in taking a stand, she had inadvertently sparked a movement that would soon sweep across the nation, forcing America to confront the harsh realities it had long ignored. As Emma prepared for the fight ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the first of many twists in a story that was far from over. The world was watching, and Emma Reed was about to show them a truth they couldn't unsee. The following weeks were a blur of activity for Emma. Her days were filled with interviews, meetings with lawyers, and clandestine gatherings with investigative journalists. Her nights were spent on the streets, documenting the real stories of LA's homeless population. But as Emma delved deeper into her crusade, the personal cost became increasingly apparent. One morning, Emma's doorbell rang. She opened it to find her best friend and fellow actress Lily Chen standing there with tears in her eyes. "Em, I'm so sorry," Lily said, her voice breaking. "They're making me do this. If I don't, they'll destroy my career too." Emma's heart sank as Lily handed her a press release. It detailed how Lily had always been concerned about Emma's erratic behavior and substance abuse issues. "It's okay, Lily," Emma said softly, even as she felt another piece of her world crumble. "I understand." As Lily left, Emma's phone buzzed with a news alert. She opened it to find footage of herself from years ago, clearly intoxicated at a party. The caption read, "Emma Reed's history of substance abuse, A star's fall from grace. Emma sank onto her couch, her head spinning. She had known there would be consequences, but this felt like her entire life was being erased, replaced by a narrative she couldn't control. Just then, her phone rang. It was Maggie. "Emma, are you okay? We've been seeing the news." Emma tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm fine, Maggie. It's just harder than I expected." There was a pause on the other end. Then Maggie spoke, her voice firm. "Listen to me, kid. What you're doing, it matters. We've got people here in the shelter talking about hope for the first time in years. You can't give up now." Emma felt a lump in her throat. "I won't, Maggie, I promise." After hanging up, Emma stood and walked to her window. The view of Los Angeles, once a symbol of her success, now seemed to mock her. But as she looked out, she noticed something she hadn't before: small clusters of tents in the distance, hidden in the shadows of the glittering skyscrapers. With renewed determination, Emma grabbed her jacket and car keys. She had work to do. Over the next few days, Emma threw herself into her mission with even greater fervor. She met with more homeless individuals, documenting their stories and the systemic failures that had led them to the streets. She connected with grassroots organizations and activists who had been fighting this battle for years, but the backlash continued to intensify. Emma's social media accounts were flooded with hate messages. Paparazzi camped outside her house, shouting questions about her mental state and drug use. One evening, as Emma returned home from a particularly grueling day, she found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single photograph: Emma talking to Maggie and the others outside the shelter. Scrawled on the back were the words, "Back off, or they pay the price." Emma's hands shook as she read the threat. This was no longer just about her career or reputation. Now, the people she was trying to help were in danger because of her actions. For the first time since starting this journey, Emma felt truly afraid. She sank to the floor of her entryway, the weight of everything crashing down on her. Tears streamed down her face as she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Hours passed as Emma sat there, grappling with her fear and doubt. As dawn broke, she finally stood, her legs stiff from sitting so long. She walked to her bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, Emma hardly recognized herself. The polished Hollywood starlet was gone, replaced by a woman with dark circles under her eyes and a determined set to her jaw. In that moment, Emma made a decision. She couldn't back down now, not when so much was at stake, but she also couldn't put Maggie and the others at risk. With shaking hands, Emma picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she'd use: the direct line to Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Alex Ramos. "Alex, it's Emma Reed. I need your help. It's time to blow this whole thing wide open." As she hung up, Emma felt a mix of terror and resolve. She knew that what she was about to do would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire system she was fighting against. Little did Emma know, her decision to partner with Alex would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Los Angeles's power structures and force the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about homelessness, corruption, and the true nature of charity. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, Emma Reed prepared for the biggest fight of her life. The price of truth was high, but she was finally ready to pay it in full. The following weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings, late-night stakeouts, and careful documentation. Emma and Alex worked tirelessly, piecing together a complex web of corruption that connected city officials, real estate developers, and supposed charitable organizations. But as their investigation deepened, so did the threats. Emma's car was vandalized, her phone hacked. She began to feel eyes on her wherever she went. Despite the mounting pressure, Emma found strength in unexpected places. One evening, she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. "Emma, it's Sarah from the shelter." Emma's heart raced. "Sarah, is everything okay?" There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came through, thick with emotion. I got a job. A real one, with benefits. And an apartment. It's tiny, but it's ours. Me and Tommy. Tears sprang to Emma's eyes. Sarah, that's amazing. How? It's because of you, Emma. The shelter. They started this new program after all the attention you brought. It's making a real difference. As Emma hung up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was why she was fighting. This was what mattered. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing her resolve. A few days later, Emma received a frantic call from Jamal. Emma, it's Maggie. She's not doing well. Emma raced to the shelter, her heart pounding. She found Maggie in a small, dimly lit room, her face pale and drawn. Hey, kid, Maggie said weakly as Emma entered. Looks like I'm checking out early. Emma fought back tears as she took Maggie's hand. Don't talk like that. We'll get you to a hospital. Maggie shook her head. No hospitals. I've lived on my own terms. I'll go on my own terms too. For hours, Emma sat with Maggie, listening to stories of her life, the joys, the sorrows, the moments of unexpected beauty found even in the darkest times. As dawn broke, Maggie's breathing became labored. She gripped Emma's hand tightly. Promise me, she whispered. Promise me you won't give up. What you're doing, it matters. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise, Maggie, I won't let you down. With a final peaceful smile, Maggie closed her eyes. She was gone. Emma sat there, holding Maggie's hand, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the grimy window. She felt hollowed out, drained. But beneath the grief, a steely determination took root. As she finally left the shelter, Emma was met by a wall of paparazzi. Cameras flashed, voices shouted questions about her breakdown and publicity stunt. For a moment, Emma froze. Then something inside her snapped. She stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong. You want a story? Here's your story. A woman died today. Her name was Maggie Thompson. She was a teacher, a friend, a human being. And she died in a shelter because our system failed her. Failed all of them. The cameras fell silent as Emma continued, her voice breaking with emotion. This isn't about me. It's about people like Maggie, like Sarah and Tommy, like Jamal. It's about a system that treats human beings as disposable, and it has to stop. As Emma spoke, a crowd began to gather. Shelter residents, passers-by, even some of the paparazzi lowered their cameras, moved by the raw emotion in her words. So go ahead, Emma concluded. Write your stories about my breakdown, but know this, I'm not stopping. Not until every person has a roof over their head and a chance at a decent life. That's Maggie's legacy, and I intend to honor it. With that, Emma turned and walked away, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. As she drove home, emotionally exhausted but more determined than ever, Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Alex. Turn on the news now. Emma flipped on the radio to hear her own voice echoing back at her. Her impromptu speech was being broadcast live across multiple stations. Social media was exploding with tattered justice for Maggie and tattered Emma Reed's promise trending worldwide. For the first time in weeks, a small smile tugged at Emma's lips. This was it. The tide was turning. As she pulled into her driveway, Emma took a deep breath. The fight was far from over, but now she knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it was a fight worth having. Maggie's face flashed in her mind, and Emma whispered a quiet promise to the night sky. I won't let you down, Maggie. We're going to change things. I swear it. Little did Emma know, her raw, emotional plea had struck a chord that would resonate far beyond Los Angeles. The movement she had inadvertently started was about to explode onto the national stage, forcing a long overdue conversation about homelessness, inequality, and the true meaning of compassion. As dawn broke over the city, Emma Reed prepared to face a new day, armed with grief, determination, and a promise she intended to keep, no matter the cost. In the days following Maggie's death and Emma's impassioned speech, a seismic shift began to ripple through Los Angeles and beyond. Emma's words, raw and unfiltered, had struck a chord with millions. The morning after her impromptu press conference, Emma awoke to find tattered justice for Maggie trending #1 worldwide. Her phone was flooded with messages, from celebrities offering support, politicians requesting meetings, and ordinary citizens sharing their own stories of struggle and homelessness. But it was a call from Alex that truly changed everything. "Emma, we've got it," Alex said, his voice tense with excitement. "The smoking gun, emails, financial records, everything. It goes all the way to the top. City officials, real estate moguls, even some A-list celebrities. They've been profiting off these urban renewal projects for years, all while funneling money through fake charities." Emma's heart raced. "When do we publish?" "Tomorrow morning. Every major news outlet simultaneously." "Emma, this is going to change everything." And change everything it did. The exposé hit like a bombshell. Los Angeles woke to headlines detailing years of corruption, bribery, and exploitation. The mayor resigned in disgrace. Real estate developers faced federal investigations. Celebrities who had been complicit in the scheme watched their careers crumble overnight. But more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about homelessness and inequality that couldn't be ignored. Emma found herself at the center of a whirlwind. She testified before Congress, gave interviews on every major network, and used her platform to amplify the voices of those who had been silenced for too long. But even as her public profile soared, Emma never forgot why she had started this fight. She poured her energy and a significant portion of her remaining fortune into creating the Maggie Thompson Foundation, dedicated to providing housing, job training, and support for those experiencing homelessness. Months passed, and slowly but surely, change began to take root. New legislation was passed to protect affordable housing. Funding for mental health and addiction services was increased. Companies began to adopt more ethical practices in urban development. 1 year to the day after Maggie's death, Emma stood on the steps of Los Angeles City Hall, addressing a crowd of thousands. Behind her stood Sarah and Tommy, Jamal, and many others whose lives had been touched by her work. "A year ago, we lost a remarkable woman named Maggie Thompson," Emma began, her voice strong and clear. "Maggie taught me that every life has value, that every person deserves dignity and respect. Her death was a tragedy, but her legacy is all of you." Emma gestured to the crowd, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Look around you. See the faces of your neighbors, your friends, your fellow human beings. This is Maggie's legacy. A community that cares, that fights for each other, that refuses to look away from injustice." As Emma continued her speech, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Her life had changed irrevocably over the past year. Her acting career was effectively over. The Hollywood machine had made sure of that. But in its place, she had found a purpose far greater than she could have imagined. "We've made progress," Emma concluded, "but our work is far from over. There are still people sleeping on our streets tonight. There are still those who would exploit the vulnerable for profit. So I ask you, will you stand with me? Will you continue this fight?" The roar of the crowd was deafening. Emma felt tears slip down her cheeks as she looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, rich and poor, from all walks of life, united in a common cause. As she left the podium, Emma's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jamal. Maggie would be proud. Emma smiled through her tears. She knew in her heart that Jamal was right. That night, as Emma stood on her balcony, looking out over the city she had once viewed so differently, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her life had taken an unexpected turn, but she wouldn't change it for anything. In the distance, she could see the lights of the new Maggie Thompson Center, a state-of-the-art facility providing housing, healthcare, and support services to those in need. It was just the beginning, but it was a start. Emma took a deep breath of the cool night air. She thought of Maggie, of Sarah and Tommy, of all the faces and stories that had touched her heart over the past year, and she made a silent promise to them all. This wasn't the end of her journey, it was just the beginning. As the stars twinkled overhead, Emma Reed, once Hollywood's darling, now a vocal advocate for the voiceless, felt a sense of purpose and peace she had never known before. She had lost much, but gained so much more. And somewhere, she liked to think, Maggie was smiling down on her, proud of the legacy they had created together.
Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.